Hi, I'm Ruth Allison from the National Technical Assistance Center on Transition, and I would like to welcome you to this session, Operationalizing Local Collaboration. Today we have two states presenting, Iowa, Kirsten Lane and Mary Jackson, and they will be followed by a presentation from Pennsylvania with Joan Kester and Aaron Weyerbach. And we will be taking questions at the end, so just feel free to put things in chat as questions come up during the presentation. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Mary and Kirsten.
Thanks, Ruth. Ruth, you can go ahead and advance the slide. We are going to jump right in since Ruth just did our introductions, which we appreciate. So for today, I know we have a short amount of time to try and pack in a lot of information. So we're going to go over this as much as possible. Keep in mind as we go through this, we have a lot of items linked throughout as resources for you guys. We're not going to pull up the resources today just because of the amount of time we have to talk with you, but wanted you to know in the presentation itself that we're going to refer to some documents and they're linked in case you guys want to take a look at those later on. We are going to talk about IVRS, which is Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation Services in Iowa, and kind of what our structure looks like currently. We're going to talk about our local school planning process, which really is going to dig into operationalizing our local collaboration. And then we're also going to touch a little bit on our new program known as JRES, or the Juvenile Reentry Services Program. So if you want to advance to the next slide, thank you. So at IVRS, we have taken a look at our data over the past years. And as everyone knows, VR has really taken a deep dive into transition services because of WIOA, because of pre-employment transition services. And so in the state of Iowa, as we have started operationalizing what the local collaboration will look like, we've actually started to change our structure a bit. In Iowa, our direct staff or our internal staff provide pre-ETS activities across the state. We also have started a multitude of contracted programs to assist with that as well. And because of that, we've put more emphasis, obviously, in the area of transition. So we have now changed our structure based on all of this information. We now have an assistant bureau chief of transition, which is actually me. I was in a previous role with VR and have now moved into this role. And we have added on counselor specialist positions that are going to focus in on assisting with transition needs across the state. So these individuals will not carry caseloads, but will actually be working on providing the supports for implementation of pre-ETS for both our internal staff and our contracted program staff. And again, this was really these changes were made based on our transition data, the growth of our transition contracted programs, and just the big emphasis of the 15% of our overall budget needing to be spent on pre-ETS activities. If we want to advance to the next slide. So just wanted to give you a little bit of background with the previous slide on kind of our structure. In Iowa, when it comes to operationalizing our local collaboration, we have developed something called our local school plans. And we have a process in place for this. And I'm actually going to turn it over to Kirsten to give a little bit of a deep dive into what that plan process looks like.
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, it's been really cool to watch the involvement and connection of VR within the schools. And as Mary said, changing their structure even to really provide that focus around transition has been really energizing, I think, for the whole state. But the one thing that started way back in the beginning of WIOA was the local school plan. It's included in our MOA. It is a part of practice across the state. It started really slow, I would say, because it was new, you know, and people resist change. And so I think that was one of the biggest challenges. I would still say that right now it's not working exactly as Mary and I kind of would wish that it would. I'm so sorry, I just realized I haven't turned on my video. Like Mary and I thought that it would or would like for it to be. We did spring surveys where we surveyed team members of the local school plan just to kind of get a feel for what was going on, who was involved in the meetings, how they were being operated. And also Mary just recently did a roundtable with educators to talk about VR services and to really get that input and feedback as to what's working, what's not working, what are ideas they have for change. And the local school planning process came up within that roundtable. So we know there are some things that need to happen to improve it, but all of the structure is in place. So we're just going to continue to work on implementation, but it really focuses on collaboration, including all of the partners from our local education agencies to our regional entities, which are AEAs or area education agencies, contracted programs, the Iowa Department for the Blind, which is our VR agency in Iowa for folks with vision loss, our CRPs. It just really helps us to get everybody on the same page and talk about with all of the overlap in the work that we're doing. Everybody has responsibilities around transition. It really helps to align. So the pre-ed services are broken out, and you'll be able to see an example of a plan in there. And the pre-ed services are broken out, some specific details that are common challenges, such as who provides job coaching as when it's a part of a school project or school goals and services, or who provides job coaching when it's outside of school and part of the VR goal or the IPE goal. So spells out exactly who would be involved. The LEA folks and the IVRS folks are always involved, and then other agencies as needed. It helps us to align our data outcomes around B14 and the state performance measures. And you know, I think when it started out slow, part of it was, it's like one more thing, you know, it's just so hard when there's one more thing to do. But I think people are starting to see, and we learned this from the roundtable too, the intent of this is really to support the work. It's not a hoop to jump through. It's not a form to get turned in, but really a way to structure your conversations and be intentional about the work that will support students moving from high school to post-high school outcomes. Next slide.
And so we acknowledge, in order to really have that local collaboration and how to make it work, there has to be some sort of state level guidance, right? And so in Iowa, we actually have 3 different memorandum of agreements, and those are here. Like we said, we're not going to pull those up today, but they are linked in case you guys want to take a look at these. But we have an MOA between IVRS and the Department of Education. There's an MOA between IDB and the Department of Education. And then there's an MOA between IVRS and IDB, because like Kirsten said, in Iowa, we're one VR system, but we are 2 separate agencies. So we have VR General, and then we have IDB that serves individuals who have visual impairments. But essentially, the MOAs really are there to help support that collaboration at the local level. It helps to further define what those responsibilities look like. And the main emphasis is to minimize that duplication. But this gives that state level guidance so that when we move to the local level, they have some overarching guidance that's going to help them develop these local school plans that we're actually going to talk about on the next slide. So if you could move to the next slide, thank you. On here, this is the local school plan that we were talking about and that Kirsten mentioned in the previous slide. The local school plan itself is really outlining the different partners' responsibilities. So if you click on the link on there when you have a chance to, there are different columns that breaks out what the school district's responsibilities are in terms of the different types of programs, courses, different types of 4+ programming, even that they have to offer students with disabilities in their district. There'll be a column on there that's going to indicate IVRS and any new and expanded services that we would be providing. It's going to talk about any contracted programs. So like I mentioned earlier, a lot of our pre-ets are provided by our internal staff, but we also have really grown our contracted programs. So our contracted programs have a column if they cover that school district and what new and expanded service that they would be providing. And of course, any community partners or anyone else that's at the table, like IDB, for example, would also have a column on the local school plan to, again, outline the roles and responsibilities, the different services and programs they have to offer. The whole point of this is really to show that the collaboration is occurring and that we are implementing what was outlined in the statewide MOA and through WIOA. but it also helps us identify gaps in service delivery. So there is a section on the plan as the teams are talking and having these conversations, it will lead to a conversation on, are there any gaps in services? Are there any new types of programs that need to be developed to meet those needs? Is there additional training that's needed from the local team in order to move forward with providing those services to students in their district? All of that can be captured on the local school plan and helps get the team figure out what that plan is going to look like going forward. Each plan is due for every public school district and private accredited school district in Iowa. We have some alternative educational settings as well that are developing these local school plans. These are due each year by November 1st. So these are living documents essentially. So every year the team is meeting. We want them at minimal to meet every fall and every spring to have conversations. We have teams that meet more frequently than that, and that is all part of that planning process, is to figure out how frequent to meet. We have some that meet monthly, quarterly, but at minimal, it's twice a year. And then the finalized plan does have to be submitted so that we have that on file in case a family was to ever reach out to us, in case a new staff was hired on and wanted to see what these services look like and who was going to be responsible for the different programming. If you want to move to the next slide, turn it back over to Kirsten.
Okay, so as Mary said, we're not going to open the links, but when we were talking earlier about how it kind of started out slow and people weren't quite sure how to do a local school plan and weren't really sure who should be included, and there just were some gaps. We got input from the field, included both LEA, AEA, and VR staff, and developed a training guide, and then provided a recorded training. So it was a Zoom meeting. It was actually scheduled to be live, but as we've heard in lots of sessions over the last couple of days, things changed. And so we created a virtual session that really walked through on a very basic level, step by step, how to start the plan, who to reach out to first, who to include in the meetings, how to schedule the meetings, some background around WIOA. And all of that's included in this guide if it's useful to you. We found that answered a lot of questions, but we also found that on an ongoing basis from the data we've collected from the surveys and from the roundtable, that there are needs for change ongoing. And so we've got a basis, a place to start, and a place to build from. So we wanted to share that with you as well. Next slide.
And so we've mentioned the survey, and here was our first attempt at doing a survey this year. That was the first time we had the survey done. It opened February 1st and it closed March 15th. And here are some questions that we asked on the survey, such as, were all the necessary members part of the local school planning process? Part of the conversation we're understanding at the local level is if not everybody is part of that planning process and doesn't know how services should be delivered locally to students with disabilities, we might be missing a pretty important piece of the puzzle. For example, if school counselors aren't involved in those conversations, there's a big role that a school counselor has when it comes to course of study, when it comes to even assessments in the state of Iowa through our assessment system. So because of that, we want to make sure the team is constantly taking a look at how can we grow and make sure our team is representing not only the staff, but even branching out to our community providers. Do we have community providers at the table? Do we have a business that's involved in the school district that should be at the table? And even branching out into students and families themselves. I would say the data that we have taken a look at, we have learned a lot from in terms of even how to rephrase our questions to capture the data differently. And so Kirsten and I are working right now to kind of summarize that data to share out, but the local teams have access to it. And so that information's been shared out, and we'd like to see not only an increase in the number of responses, but also how that data is going to be utilized then to move forward to make a change in their process. So during their spring meeting, that's the intent intent is to share out that data and then talk about, well, what could we improve then for next school year? How could we make changes to our local school plan to fill maybe those gaps, or to make sure all those members are at the table so that those outcomes for students with disabilities are improving within their district. We didn't mention this on this slide, but we also did some roundtable discussions like Kirsten said. So we did bring together educators as well. We also did another roundtable discussion with parents. So we partnered with some parent advocacy groups in Iowa to bring together some parents to get feedback on this process and how services are going. So we've captured a lot of data, and now we're at the point, and these just happened actually recently within the last month. So now we're at the point of trying to sift through all that data and figure out, what does that mean for VR system at the state level now, and any changes we need to make. So I feel like when we're talking about operationalizing locally, there still is, it's a cycle. You might have things happening at the local level, which feeds back into the state level on changes overall that maybe we need to make to our system, to policy, additional training that might be needed. It should be a constant feedback loop. And I think that's what Kirsten and I are trying to create here in Iowa with this process. It is newer, like we said, with the survey, and we've certainly learned a lot over the last couple of months with the roundtable discussions we've had. And so now it's taking a look at the state level to see what changes we're going to need to make, and will that impact any of our MOAs that we've previously developed. So again, we want it to be that cycle that's going to be happening going forward. Next slide, please.
The final piece of information around the local school planning process that we wanted to share with you is just our collaboration FAQ. And this focuses on WIOA and some of the questions that come up most often. It's sorted by kind of grouped. The questions are grouped kind of by category, but they're also linked. So if you scroll through the list of questions at the top, you will find that if you click on one that piques your interest or that you want to explore, it will take you right to that question. So you don't have to just scroll through everything. There's also a list of acronyms, and we go through some definitions and just some clarifying information, a lot of stuff about who does what and who pays for what and that kind of thing. So we wanted you to have access to that as well. And then Mary has the final slide.
And through this process of the local school plan, it identifies gaps in service delivery. And we recognize in the state of Iowa that we were not serving our students that were in the juvenile correctional system. And so because of that, we actually developed a program called JRES, the Juvenile Reentry System Program. This is a partnership between IVRS and the Division of Criminal and Juvenile Justice Planning, also known as CJJP in Iowa. They are actually under our Department of Human Rights. This program is going to provide services to youth with disabilities involved in the juvenile justice system in Iowa. Because of these local planning process, we found that as students were being served in the high school setting, all of a sudden they were disappearing, kind of going into this black hole of they left the system and maybe came back. And it was almost like, for example, 9 months worth of nothing. And then they come back to their school district. And through those local conversations, they identified this as a gap in service delivery in multiple districts. And so because of that, we had conversations at the state level. How can we make changes? So we are serving and improving the outcomes for students that are going into the juvenile justice system. And so that is really how this program started. The overall goal is to improve youth transition to the community and reduce recidivism rates, meaning that we're hoping that as they go back into their community, that they're re-entering and being successful so they're not going back into the system. There's lots that can be provided through PREETs. There's lots of other transition services that can be provided, but it was really through our local planning process that this need was identified and how this program started. And this is just one example of how that local process and that cycle should work. We identify those needs, and then at the state level, is there changes we need to make in whether it's our policy, our philosophy, or in just service delivery. And that is, we just wanted to share this as just one example and a new program that started recently based on that data and that information. And I know we are short on our time. So if you want to go to the next slide, I believe, Ruth, we are waiting till the end for our questions. So I don't know if I'm turning it back over to you, Ruth, to introduce Pennsylvania.
I think Joan and Aaron, if you just want to kick it off and keep going, we know we're short on time. We'll just pull up the other PowerPoint and we'll be good to go.
Great. Hello, everyone. We'll get our PowerPoint up, but I'm Joan Kester. I'm actually with George Washington University, and we've had a Transition Discoveries Initiative project that's all been based in Pennsylvania, but we've created a model that could be used and replicated in other states. And my partner in crime is...
Hi, everyone. I'm Erin Weierbach. I'm the Youth Empowerment Coordinator for the Peel Center, which is our state parent training and information center in Pennsylvania.
And also not joining us today, but Matthew Flanagan is with the Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistance Network. But prior to that, he worked at GW on the project. So many kudos go out to Matt as well. One of the exciting things we'd like to share is this is really a grassroots model that's been developed through research. And throughout the 4 years that we've operated the project, we have had over 100 partners, youth, families, and stakeholders involved in the development of the resources and also the model. Next slide, please. We won't go over this in detail, but the bottom line is this all started with the idea that if we could evaluate what's happening in transition, it would be great to have youth and families up front and center. So we started a pilot, and we had urban, suburban, and rural school district that were involved in the development of what we're going to be sharing with you today. Next slide. Okay, so we've been funded. Again, this is kind of a non-traditional approach, but we've been funded by the Pennsylvania Developmental Disabilities Council. They were very interested in finding out what does effective transition look like based on youth and families. And so this idea that we would create a partnership between GW, which kind of is the principal investigator, but many of you may know me. I'm from Pennsylvania, and I've been involved in transition for many years. And then we've had the Peel Center, feeling that we needed a strong voice of youth and families. And then we have the Pennsylvania Youth Leadership Network, which is an inclusive leadership group for youth with and without disabilities. You know, our tagline is your voice, your story, and your future. And that's been the foundation of our work. Next slide. Okay, and I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail with this, but these were the two things that we did to come up with the Transition Discoveries framework. We looked at we had focus groups with youth and families separately, of course, and we had young people trained as researchers who ran the focus groups. And so they were young people were much more open to sharing their dreams and goals. And we also had focus groups with family members. And through that, we came up with 9 quality indicators. Those were the 9 things that youth and family felt were most important. We'll share those in a moment. And then we spent years collaborating with the Pennsylvania community of practice, transition community of practice, and talked to over 500 people to talk about successful practices. So the framework has 9 indicators of what it would take to be successful, and then 54 what we call sub-indicators or practice areas. So we've developed a metric for that, which has been validated, and also have an implementation model on the website, which we'll share. Next slide.
I did just post the link to the website in the chat box, and I just noted that I heard the Iowa team mention this idea of not creating more work, but trying to find out what's already in practice and going on. And so really at the core of a lot of what we're trying to do is get people to just rethink the wonderful things that are already in existence, or try to find new ways to utilize tools and include those experiences of youth and families and what's already going on.
Yeah, that just emphasizes that while what I liked about what Iowa was talking about, it was an iterative process that connected both what happened at the state level as well as the local level. And it was, it wasn't a top-down approach. And that's how this has been. Really, it's been a grassroots effort. And we've tried to create this model that could be used by other states. So these are the indicators that we talked about, and they all tie to youth development. So we've had 6 sites in our Transition Quality Empowerment Project funded by the Developmental Disabilities Council, but now Pennsylvania is scaling this up, and just through the patent system, they have 25 more schools that are implementing the model. But just as a brief thing, these are things that many of us have seen before about what is important. But just to highlight the one thing, and again, this shouldn't be a surprise to us, but we don't often see it in the literature, is the most important thing that young people wanted to talk about was relationships. And so I thought that was pretty cool, that now we're looking at what are the practices that help young people develop friendships, be in leadership roles and such. But everything ties back to youth development. And Erin, I don't know if you want to mention anything that we found just briefly about that important role of focusing on youth voice.
Yeah, I just wanted to tie this into our community of practice in Pennsylvania and our transition conversations at the state level. It's been really cool to see the data and feedback we're getting from youth through this initiative, and how we can incorporate that into everything else going on with regards to youth voice. So, for example, there's been lots of conversations around person-driven planning and person-centered planning. And then, sometimes I'm sure everybody on this call can attest to this, that sometimes you get young people that they don't know what that means to be in the center or to be given that opportunity. And so we're really trying to get communities to see that if you start including youth early and at every level, it will really increase the outcomes in all these areas. So it's been really nice to see the crossover into other systems too, not just in education or in transition.
Yeah, and we're looking at transition as not defined by the law, but more of a viewpoint of a community engagement, ownership versus just being on the school. So next slide, please. So we do have theory behind our model. We won't go into a lot of detail, but this is based on Bronfenbrenner ecology theory that says that, when you look at young people and their education, it isn't just the young person and the family and interventions. It is a systems level issue that requires collaboration across multiple ecologies. And our idea is to try to shift from these individual silos or even individual communities and have people connected more as a community of practice. Next slide.
I think we had a typo on the last slide. It said collaboration, which I just kind of wanted to point out was a happy mistake. I kind of like that.
It is cool. I have to say that this has been the most fun project that I've ever had in my career because of connecting with young adults and youth and their families. So yeah. So Erin, do you want to take a stab at this one?
Sure. This is just kind of a visual of everything Joan just said, but essentially we're trying to take this thought of transition from beyond compliance, beyond the IEP, beyond just the school or the transition coordinator, and thinking about these communities of supports around students for building social capital and, increasing their opportunity for success once they leave the school. So, we're including all of these things. So, in the school, the staff and friends and support people, other families, providing peer support and all that's in the school. And then those community agencies that are supporting students while enrolled in high school and beyond. So how can you connect them outside of the walls of the school again? And then community partners, so employers and peers, where are youth and families going naturally? There are some really great things. Pittsburgh Public School District is one of the schools we work with, and there are lots of community organizations that are really just geared towards connecting families. So again, not reinventing the wheel, but how do you get people to connected to what's already in existence?
Thanks, Erin. Next slide, please. Okay, so as you can tell, this is a high level, high level overview. So there's a whole process implementation model, excuse me, that we could go on and on about, but we wanted to get to the meat of it to show you the kind of practices that have been generated at the local level. And we're using appreciative inquiry. If you're not familiar with that, it's a systems level or organizational level person-centered planning approach, I think is the best way. So, we sit around and we talk about problems, and this shifts it to, we have the sites collect data using that quality indicator survey, and then they pull together change agent teams, and they have youth and young adults having major roles and other stakeholders. And as Erin said, it could be the coach, it could be an employer, it really could be anybody that is interested or has a stake in transition. So they go through this process of discovering what is good, and then they go through a process of what they would love to see. And then they go through the process of delivering, like creating a plan. And then there are, Matt's created a bunch of other tools for monthly implementation and a data dashboard to be able to use the data to inform, excuse me, the priorities that are set in the teams. Okay, next slide. Okay, and you're up. You're the one on the boots on the ground with this, Erin.
Yeah, I did also share a link. For the lack of time, I went ahead and posted a link in the chat box, but we have youth and families involved even in our team and the work we're creating. So this is just an example. The Race Center had reached out and saw the value in youth voice and the work we were doing. And so we were really privileged to be able to work with them. So I shared the link to that too.
Oh, good. Thank you.
So yeah, so some pro tips. I feel like one of the coolest parts of this work is that we get to learn from communities, and I never want communities to feel that we're the experts or we presume to be the experts. I really want them to feel valued, that they are the experts. And so I wrote some things down, some stories that I felt like were really great examples of some of these things. So we have increased youth and family engagement and transition planning before, during, and after high school. Working to create youth leadership and peer mentoring opportunities, and then establishing these unconventional communities of practice between youth, families, and professionals in the community. So just some examples, one of the urban school that we're working with, I think that they have been so wonderful in teaching us ways to collaborate in the community outside of the school. They have a transition team at the district level and in each of their high schools, which is somewhat unique. And I think having that buy-in from administrators and the school board and the district really sets the tone for the importance of transition practices throughout. I did mention that they had an abundance of resources in the community. And so they're really wonderful at getting families connected to resources outside of the school and valuing relationships. So it's not just about the education piece, but really seeing that increased engagement and leadership opportunities and relationships feed into all of that. So I think that's really instrumental to their student outcomes. And one of our rural districts we met them and has a lot of barriers that I think a lot of rural communities have, but I think again, the relationship part is what is helping them be successful. They have identified some champions in their school who really value student voice. And I just wanted to share that one of the outcomes of that action planning that Joan just shared is increasing youth engagement. And so they took it to their students and they said, what does this look like for you? What do you wish leadership looked like in your school? And so right now they're in the process of getting an inclusive youth leadership group off the ground. Their long-term goal is to create a mentoring system where they are teaching leadership to middle school students. Through this process, they identified the need for discussing transition earlier. And so the youth and young adults are completely leading that. They are, taking the initiative to pull from different curriculums they like and put together a program that they can then take into the middle schools, which I'm really excited and looking forward to. And then the third of our veteran, our first 3 sites we worked with is more of a mix of a community. So they have some districts that are rural, urban, and suburban. And we work with them as their transition council. So they have a really diverse group of voices and experiences in the council, and they work really well together. They really are intentional about the relationship building, finding ways to include youth and families. Through this process, they've identified the need for even more. So while they have so many wonderful programs and things going on in their county, there was a disconnect to the youth and families knowing about it. So they've really been working on their communication. How do youth and families best receive information? But they're including youth and families in the conversation. So, trying to find ways to include them at all levels. We just had actually a meeting about that this week where they just brainstormed all of the things going on in their county, not just in their transition council, but countywide. What are all the things going on? Who has a direct connection? How can we use our personal social capital to support students and increase, leadership opportunities for them? So that's really good. Just trying to get into the habit of automatically thinking, how can we include youth and families in this? So that's been, really great to watch.
Yeah, it's amazing when, we really have just acted as facilitators, but also that what Aaron said about mapping out what's already out there. I know both Matt and Aaron spent quite a few visits out in Pittsburgh and found some groups that the school wasn't connected to, even though they have a pretty broad connection. And they ended up hosting escape rooms and things of that nature to kind of bring that group into the fold. And that was really, really a positive experience for the group as well as for the school. So growing those local practices, but then also connecting them to evidence-based approaches has really been the key to what we're going to talk about next. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Ooh, I think you are skipping slides here. If you go. Oh,
I think actually we accidentally skipped slide 9 and 10, or you might be referring to one of those.
Okay, so we have a slide that was about the website. And I'm not sure. Yeah. Can you go back? Okay. Well,
I'll share it in the chat.
Okay. So one thing we want to leave you with, we have developed so many resources with over 100 people being involved in this website. And the website, the main area, what we're really proud about, and we're going to be continuing to build out this learning center, it's a by youth for youth approach. So if you look at the website and you look under the framework tab, what you'll find is basically an opportunity for youth to ramp into transition services. And so, you know, beginning conversations about the indicators and then the sub indicators, there's videos, there's a small amount of text, there's tip sheets. And then if you go under resources, because we are connected to the university, a shout out to our secondary transition master's students. We have, I think, 64 lesson plans. So if you go under resources, you can select what type of resource or what topic. Currently, we're working on creating like a guide or a map to help people follow through. Things aren't linear in the framework. So I encourage you to go there and to also get in touch with us, you know, if you have any questions. So that, I think we are just out of time, and our contact information is on the final slide. And needless to say, we're really appreciative of this opportunity. Again, a shout out to the whole Pennsylvania team and the Pennsylvania Bureau of Special Education for taking this model and scaling it up. As I said, we'd be very interested in talking to any of you about how to use the resources or how to potentially engage in an implementation model. So thank you.
I think we're about out of time. We probably, if someone wants to unmute, we probably have time for one question. Or if you want to put it in chat, the PowerPoints, both of them will be posted, so you can access those later. We've seen a lot of connections being made in the chat, and that's wonderful to see. And I think you've got Mary and Kirsten's and Aaron and Joan's email if you want to follow up. But does anybody have a quick question for our last 3 minutes?
We have a couple people just asked for the PowerPoint, so I think you guys will.
Yeah.
I did share my email as well if anyone's interested in, you know, having more conversations. 20 minutes is a little unfair because I think we could talk about it on and on and on, but we really appreciate it.
You guys have been good sports about the limited time. We appreciate that. But yeah, everything from all of the presentations will be posted and available, the resources, the PowerPoints, etc. So I believe, Michael, those will be up tomorrow, right, from today?
I believe so, yeah. I think that's what we were told. So yes.
Okay.
Thank you all so much for including us. It was great to present with Iowa as well. I'm looking forward to connecting with Iowa myself, actually, and hearing more about what you guys have going on. So I know we really appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It's been great. And of course, we'll have the extended learning if you have additional questions. So,
Yeah.
all right. Bye.
Thank
Thanks,
you all.
everyone.
Thank you.